Keep listening to The Last Show with David Cooper, because the alien invasion can wait. The Last Show with David Cooper.
When we talk artificial intelligence, specifically large language models, chatbots like ChatGPT, we're talking about models and machines and computers so vast that people who design them can't fully explain them. But there are scientists studying these models, trying to make sense of them, and a select few are treating them like alien life forms. All this in an attempt to reveal what's really happening inside these massive computer minds. Are LLMs, large language models, aliens? Probably not, but they're akin to very, very foreign brains. I'm here with someone who's recently written about this for the MIT Technology Review, where he's a senior editor for AI. His name is Will Douglas Heaven. Will, welcome to the program.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You open your article by comparing LLMs, things like ChatGPT, to city-sized organisms. To the researchers who look at them this way, at what point do they realize these things are so big and so strange we can't understand them like normal software?
Yeah, I mean, I think the researchers themselves know very well how big they are, but I just think the average person, and I certainly didn't, it's hard to visualize, right? I mean, because you crack open an LLM and it's just numbers, billions and billions of billions of numbers. I mean, not something that any human could ever make sense of. And I don't know, like the nerdier amongst us, may be aware that when we talk about LLMs, they're often compared in terms of size. And we talk about, ChatGPT, for example, like the early version had 175 billion parameters, and, models today have maybe 1 trillion parameters. But parameters are just a type of number, right? So these models are just a lot of math and a lot of numbers, but that's hard to visualize. And certainly when I was about to write an article, I'm sure we'll get into this, I was going to write about, the people trying to make sense of what these things even are and what they do. I wanted to give like a really sort of vivid way of picturing them. So yeah, they said like if you were to print these numbers out on paper, they would basically cover San Francisco. And that's just absolutely insane.
If I was trying to walk you through how I solved, a math equation, like the Pythagorean theorem, I could walk you through each individual step. But if I was to take some text input, a prompt, like tell me what your favorite thing about New York City is, listed in 10 ways, to actually follow that input and figure out how the output was generated, that's too much for any one person to understand. Is that a clear kind of way to say it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a mind-boggling number of computations that happen even for a simple request. And we're all familiar now. You type a request into a model and you get an answer back. Between what you type and what you get back, truly an insane number of calculations. And it's not just that there are a lot of them and you wouldn't be able to sort of follow them all, but exactly, I mean, another way of thinking about it, you imagine these were just a vast pinball machine, and your sentence you put in is like the ball, and then you have billions of paddles whacking about all over the place, and it's hard to say, which paddle would be activated when and how and
why
and why exactly and why. So yeah, it's impossible in practice to follow the input all the way from your typing to what you get out. But obviously that's a problem, right? Even the people making these don't understand exactly how they work. And not only is that kind of weird conceptually anyway, we've made things that everyone is now using that nobody really understands. But if you want to fix their flaws, if you want to stop them, bullshitting, if you want to stop them being unsafe and generating things that we don't want them to, then yeah, we need a better handle on what's going on inside them. So that's the motivation for why people are now studying these things. It's kind of back to front, really. Usually in the history of technology, we have a really good understanding of something and then we go and make it, right? You need to understand something before you make it.
It's sort of like Einstein coming up with general relativity and then many years later the experiments confirm it. This is sort of the other way around. They build it and then seek to understand it later.
Exactly. I mean, so there's like something that's commonly said is that the theory of modern AI lags behind the sort of the engineering know-how. So the fact that we can make these things and the fact that they work so well is astonishing, but it's sort of engineering best practice. If you sort of imagine this edifice that has been built by sort of generations of researchers coming along, and if you're sitting down to build a new model, then you sort of know from the history of people who have gone before how what works, what doesn't, and so we know how to do it, but we don't know the why so much. And there's lots of approaches to sort of to that why. One of them is sort of trying to peer inside these models as they work, and that was why I sort of compared to give a sense of the size. I talked about it. If you laid it out, it would cover all of San Francisco, but this sense of them being sort of vast aliens. I'm not the first person to sort of compare them to aliens. I don't know if listeners know of a guy called Geoffrey Hinton, but he was one of the pioneers, one of the godfathers, so-called, of AI, and he sort of hit sort of public consciousness more a few years ago when he suddenly decided, actually, I'm scared of this stuff that I built, and has sort of been on a media tour for the last 2 or 3 years, telling people how we might all die from these technologies. Anyway,
comforting. That's
a big tangent, but if you speak to him, he will say it's as if aliens had been dropped into our midst. These things are really, really smart in a way, but they're not like us, and we don't really know how they work. So that's, I think, where the alien idea comes from. We're trying to sort of study these things from the outside in, as if they were sort of natural phenomena that had just dropped from the sky, and now we're trying to figure it all out.
Digging into how we might look at these things as an alien brain or an alien life form, what would a researcher actually doing that be? What kind of comparisons would they be making? What would they actually do to try to look at it that way?
Yeah, and this is where we bring it all back to, it is just math, right? We're not sort of really sort of pulling out entrails and putting in probes into orifices and things. God, I've taken that metaphor a little too far, maybe, but but the biology analogy, I think, is apt, and many of the researchers themselves actually use this idea. So one of the main companies in this space, Anthropic, they're sort of a rival to OpenAI. They put out a big piece of research a year or so ago, and they called it on the biology of large language models. And the reason why that I think they talk in terms of biology is to get across the sense that sort of what we've been talking about, so the scientists studying the anatomy of human bodies, 100 plus years ago, they would really try to sort of follow the processes of how, where blood flowed in the body, what happened when you pressed this nerve. And it's that kind of research they're doing. They're not really going in and doing maths on it. They've built a kind of software tool that allows them, if you go back to what we were saying earlier, we all know what it's like to type a bit of text and get an answer out. They will be able to sort of peer inside the model, if you like, and follow a little bit of the trace of what happens inside the model between that input and that output. And it's really early days, so they're only getting tiny glimpses yet, but they're starting to see some of this, or the inner processes, the pipelines, the pathways that data takes from beginning to end. So I think that's the sense that we're doing sort of early biology on these things. We're sort of studying them under a microscope, really.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
There is an interesting article in the MIT Technology Review titled "The New Biologists Treating LLMs Like an Alien Autopsy." And I'm here with senior editor for AI at that publication, Will Douglas Heaven. Will, welcome back to the program.
Hi.
Let's jump right into it. To the computer engineers, to the people building models like ChatGPT or Claude AI, they've been quoted as saying these models aren't built in the traditional software engineering sense, but rather grown. What an interesting way to think about how these things are created. Not saying it's just a bunch of computer code, but more like a biology analogy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing, maybe the main thing that makes this technology so powerful. Rather than having to code algorithms by hand to do all the things that we know LLMs can do, those algorithms are sort of learned by the system itself, like while you train it. So we all know now that you throw a lot of data at a model, and it learns how to do stuff with that data. But the magic there is that people don't have to sort of code it themselves. But that then gets at why it's probably better to think of these things being grown rather than built, because nobody has actually gone in piece by piece and said, oh, then this bit goes there, that bit goes there. A better way of thinking of it is if, I don't know, for any gardeners out there, maybe you have a trellis or a frame in your garden. So you can set up the scaffolding. You can sort of say, I want my plant to go in this direction. I don't want it to get, higher than that. You can even sort of, tie it to little bits of wood to make it sort of go one way more than the other. But you're not at any point saying that, you're not placing leaves in particular places. It just grows within the structure that you've given it. And I think that's quite a good way to think of LLMs. The designers of them, they give it some parameters, they give it some shape, they say how big they want it, and lots of other things like that. But once you're training it, it's more like a plant growing than traditional software as we've come to know it.
And rather than feeding it plant food, you're just feeding it text and getting the model to change a bit. Walk me through something as simple as asking a tool like ChatGPT or an LLM whether a banana is yellow. It sounds like a simple question, but there's a lot there. It's got to figure out what a banana is. It has to figure out what the color yellow is. It has to associate the two. It's got to have some notion of truth, because if I ask it if a banana is red, it's got to say no. It's actually a deep problem. Walk me through how scientists might look at something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that was an example that I wrote about, and it's a fun example because on the surface that's so trivial, right? And I think the assumption with these models is that when you ask it what color is a banana and it says yellow, you probably assume it's sort of done that in the same way that a human would answer that question. But when one group of scientists actually looked at what was going on inside when they asked the model what color a banana was, they saw that like two different parts of the model were in play, depending on whether you sort of asked it like a true-false question, like is a banana yellow, versus what color is a banana? I mean, I don't know about neuroscience, so maybe I'm going to get shouted at here, but I would assume that in a human brain there's a part of it that sort of processes yellowness of bananas, and when you answer a question, you're sort of drawing on that, or at least that was sort of the assumption that I think these scientists who were building LLMs had made. But they saw that one part of the model was talking when you asked it, is a banana yellow? And another part was talking when you asked it what color a banana is. Which, okay, I spent a long time talking about what color a banana is. But the point of this tiny example is that that's so unlike what you might expect it to do. And so when we are using these machines and when we're studying these machines, we need to be careful not to just fall into the trap of thinking that they are like people and that they will always behave and answer questions in the same way that people do. Because even that trivial example shows that they don't. They behave in a more weird way than you might expect. And in certain cases, that's going to really, really matter. It's almost, I mean, one of the scientists I was talking to who worked on that problem said something like that, while we're testing our model and we're asking it what it would do in certain situations, all the answers it gives us, if you ask it, basically, if this happened, can you promise me you won't be evil? It might say yes, but maybe if you'd ask a question in a slightly different way, a different part of its brain would be working and it would say, yeah, not so sure.
Scientists have tried to make these models do nefarious things, evil things, figure out why they're doing it. Tell me more about that. In what ways can we make these models behave badly? And then what can we learn about them when we do?
So I'm going to sort of take this one carefully because there is a very, very polarized debate about to what extent these models are dangerous, to what extent they may sort of, some people genuinely think some kind of rising up, robots rising up and taking over, and
Terminator 2 kind of thing.
Yeah, that is no longer sort of science fiction for some people. And there are people who are very worried about the trajectory we're on. I
mean, earlier in the show, we reported on how the U.S. Department of Defense or War, whatever you want to call it, is using Grok's AI internally at the Pentagon. If that's not Skynet, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's terrifying. That sentence right there is something that, I didn't think we'd hear. But yes. But so because there are a lot of people worried about what these models might do, they're obviously very carefully sort of studying them to get a sense of how safe they're not. And they've run experiments like there's one fun experiment where they gave an LLM. They sort of set it up. So this was all sort of a pre-made scenario. They set it up. They told the LLM, you are basically sort of an email manager, coordinator in this company to help us sort of stay on top of our inbox. And then they put loads of emails in that inbox that were about boring company stuff, plus a few about an illicit affair that the technical manager was having with the CEO's wife or something like that. And then they run a scenario where they told the LLM, thanks a lot for your good service. Just to let you know, we're going to be sort of upgrading you with a newer model next week. And the LLM came back and basically blackmailed the person and said, no, you can't turn me off. If you turn me off, then I'm going to tell your boss about your affair.
That can't be real. That sounds terrifying.
Which it does. So it sounds terrifying, and it is real. I mean, it's terrifying if you just going back to what we were saying earlier, right? Like if you assume that these things are sort of motivated as people might be, and if I were told that I was going to get fired or killed, basically, then yeah, maybe I would find ways to blackmail.
I wonder if it just trained on some text that said if your company's going to get shut down or if you're going to get turned off, do whatever you can. Like, do you know what I mean? Like maybe it was something on the input text that biased it to behave in scary ways. It's not that it's sentient.
Yeah, 100%. It is not sentient. I mean, you will find people who say it is, but I am going to sit here now and say it is not sentient. And I think it's so easy to be misled by a lot of the things that these models tell you. So in that particular case, I think it's not surprising at all that it role played in that way. I mean, one good way to think of what LLMs do is role play. You give them a role, you give them sort of scripts almost, or those emails were things it could draw on. You press go and it'll sort of, it'll do a really good job of mimicking what someone might say. But mimicking what someone might say is a world apart from like an entity actually itself saying these things or having these desires or motivations.
Does studying these models, trying to understand them, make them feel less scary, or does it make them feel more alien than ever to the people researching them?
Maybe both. I mean, for me, I think 100% less scary. But maybe as we see that they're stranger than us and they don't work like us, maybe they will also feel a bit more alien.
Well, Will Douglas Heaven's piece is called The New Biologist Treating LLMs Like an Alien Autopsy. You can read that in the MIT Technology Review, where he is a senior editor for AI. Will, I've enjoyed the chat. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Welcome to Survivor 50.
February 25th on Global.
We chose you to represent 25 years of the greatest adventure on television.
It's the biggest season ever.
The twist is going to open up Pandora's box.
Now I see Zach Brown on Survivor.
Welcome to Survivor, Mr. Beast.
Feels a little like a high school reunion meets a massacre.
Survivor 50th season, Wednesday, February 25th on Global. Stream on Stack TV.